Hi, everybody. My name is Simon Gutierrez. I'm on the communications team at Pacific Power. I hope you all are enjoying a little dinner. We had about 100 people sign up for tonight, and 100 people did not show up, as you noticed by some of the empty white tablecloths. So feel free to go back and get another plate. We got plenty of food, and we're here to feed y'all. We're here tonight to talk about what we're doing as a company to protect against the threat of wildfire, to guard the communities that we serve. What we call that wildfire mitigation, and we're here to give you some details about our wildfire mitigation plan. We're going to have a little bit of a presentation here. We'll have some slides that we'll go through. We'll have some videos that we'll show. And after we're done with our presentation, which should probably take about a half hour, 45 minutes, we'll have a chance for a little Q&A session where if you guys have questions, we'll do our very best to answer them. Here tonight with me are three other folks that we've got that are experts in wildfire mitigation. Here to my right is Megan Buckner. She is our, what is it again? The Director of Wildfire Mitigation Program Delivery. So she's an expert in wildfire mitigation. She works on the engineering side, and she can tell you about the gadgets that we have on our lines and some of the fancy high-tech equipment that we've put in place to make our equipment more responsive in high fire risk times. We've also got Nora Yatsoff next to her. That's Nora. She's our Director of Emergency Management, and she can tell you a little bit about what you can do if the power goes off for some reason, if we have a public safety power shutoff, if we have an emergency de-energization that we have to do because there's a fire that's getting close to our equipment, things you can do around your home to keep your home safe, and things you can prepare, inside your home, like an emergency kit to get ready for an extended power outage. And then we have Chester Lampkin. Chester's actually going to be up first. He's on our meteorology team, and he's going to walk you through what we do, what we call situational awareness, how we're using top-end weather modeling and forecasting and AI to stay a couple steps ahead of the weather and to really understand what's going on in terms of wildfire risks. Wildfire mitigation is a top priority for Pacific Power. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars over the last several years in wildfire mitigation efforts, and we've committed to investing about $2 billion over our 6-state territory in the next 5 years. So it's something we take very seriously. Our communities are very important to us. We're proud to serve you and provide you with electricity, but we also want to keep you safe, obviously. We're going to start things off with a little bit of a video. It kind of gives you a high-level overview of some of the things that we're doing on the ground in terms of wildfire mitigation, the things that we do to trim trees, the various technologies that we employ to make sure that we're keeping our communities safe. So let's go ahead and take a look at that video right now.
It's important for a utility to prepare for major events, including storms and wildfire, to keep our customers safe in the communities that we serve. PacifiCorp, over the last several years, has put a lot of effort and thought into wildfire safety, wildfire mitigation across the 6-state territory that we have, specifically identifying the areas that are of higher risk and impact and consequence.
We're making very prudent investments to improve reliability, improve the resiliency of our network, and then more importantly, to prevent wildfire risks.
Grid hardening is anything that you do to improve your system, whether it be to add technology or to simply rebuild a line, replace poles, replace wire. All of those things add to the reliability of the system.
Covered conductor, it's got a bare wire in the center, but it's actually covered in a real hard insulation. The point of it is if a tree or something were to come into the line and make contact, it would help in preventing a wildfire from starting. It can actually be beneficial year-round. From winter storms to branches being laid into the line, it'll actually keep the power on.
We're rebuilding literally hundreds of miles of lines and adding intelligent devices out into the field that will give us better situational awareness, real-time control, and information right at our fingertips so that we can react faster.
The deployment of additional field devices such as field reclosers allow us to de-energize from a point out that impacts only the necessary customers.
We can actually open or close these switches remotely instead of having to get somebody to come out in the field at one of those locations.
We're deploying several hundred weather stations across our service territory. Those weather stations are used to feed information into our weather modeling and to give our forecasters better handle of what's happening in our system.
Weather is the #1 impact on system reliability, on your electric service. We are currently running high-resolution forecast models. We're creating hourly 30-year data sets of historical weather conditions. We're combining all of this with wildfire modeling software that allows us to simulate millions of wildfires every day so that we can map out the risk and the consequence of wildfires based on current forecast conditions. So all of this information allows us to better understand what's coming and where we need to focus to take action to stay ahead of those wildfire risks.
Vegetation management is ensuring that we don't have trees that grow into the power lines. It's also managing defective or hazardous trees, working around poles and making sure that we have clearance at the base of poles. And so this is a perfect example, looking up at that tree right there with the dieback that started up on the top. And typically when you have about 1/3 to 2/3 of the tree that's dying, it's very difficult for the tree to come back from that.
So investments in wildfire mitigation live on beyond just the reduction of wildfire risk. These are investments that help the system be more resilient in the long term. Through the winter storms, through the summer wind events, these investments provide value to the customers for years to come.
All right, and that brings us to our first topic, which was kind of mentioned in the video briefly. It was situational awareness. And for that, we're going to go to Chester Lampkin, again, one of our meteorologists. He's going to tell you all about our really interesting and pretty high-tech weather modeling capabilities and how we use them. Chester, come on up.
Thank you, Simon. Just grabbing my notes here. All right. Hopefully everyone's doing well this evening. Thanks for coming out. We really appreciate it. It's good for us to be able to connect with you all in person. Oftentimes that could be a difficult thing to do. We have all very busy lives, and so it's good to come out and see the communities that we serve. So I'm really excited to be here. My name is Chester. As Simon mentioned, I'm part of the meteorology team here at Pacific Power. I'm actually pretty new to the company. So like you all, just a few months ago, really, like 7-8 months ago, I was a utility customer, and that was it. I was not part of a utility. I didn't work for a utility. So I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about what Pacific Power does, and it's pretty interesting, some pretty amazing stuff. So hopefully you guys can take away something cool from this as we get through the day this evening. So a lot of you all have probably lived in Oregon for a long time. Even if you haven't, you've lived in other parts of the United States, you've probably noticed the weather can get quite strange. I mean, that's nothing new. But I would say in recent years, we've seen more and different types of extreme weather. We're seeing it, even now. Later this week, it's going to be nearly 80 degrees here in Coos Bay. That's pretty warm for May. I mean, it's pretty warm, period, but it's warm for May for sure. Out east, they're having tornado outbreaks. It's been a banner year for those folks. And, snow in Salt Lake City just the other day. So, the weather gets wild. It can get wild. We're seeing unusual weather. We're seeing more extreme weather. A lot of studies, a lot of scientists have looked at this, and they're seeing more extremes, more weather that's been on either extreme of the spectrum. And that includes the weather that is conducive for wildfire. The wildfire threat has been spreading across the West, Oregon included, and we are seeing this happen right now. This is history in the making, if you will. At first, it was more of a California problem, right? And now we're seeing more and more wildfires break out farther and farther north into Oregon and Washington and other parts of the West. So it's something that is impacting all of us. This is not just a community problem here in Coos Bay or for our friends in Roseburg or, down in Bandon or anywhere, in this area. It's not just our community dealing with the impacts of wildfire. It's something that we're seeing all across the West, all across the country. Utilities out in the East Coast now are starting up wildfire mitigation plans and hiring meteorologists, just like Pacific Power. And that's something that's really unique here. Like, we're one of the first utilities in the country, and we're leading in that department, where we've hired an in-house meteorology team to help our customers and our communities stay ahead of this extreme weather, the weather we've been seeing that's becoming more extreme. So as my priority as a meteorologist, and everybody who works on my team, and everybody who works at Pacific Power, our job is to make sure that we stay ahead of the extreme weather. We know what is going to happen, how it's going to impact the system, and how it may impact our customers and our communities. Again, we're one of the first companies to have an in-house meteorologist team. We also have advanced weather research and forecasting capabilities. It's all in-house, right? We have our own computer modeling. We've come up with our own forecast techniques. We have this really brilliant data scientist who does stuff that I can't even imagine, but he's able to help us make better weather forecasts so we can protect the system and the community and mitigate that wildfire risk. So how does it all work? How does it all come together, and how does it play into how it impacts you all every day? Let's start with situational awareness. So for us in meteorology, our job is to be aware of the current conditions and what is coming soon. We're just aware of the conditions that could lead to extreme fires. We're also aware of potential extreme wind events. We're aware of extreme rain events and the potential for ice and snowstorms as well. We are collecting and analyzing data in real time to predict wildfire conditions. And we're taking different actions when we see that risk growing. Now, wildfires, they're not new. I mean, they've been around since before any of us, our ancestors were here. Before any people were here. Wildfire's been here for a long time. So it is part of a natural cycle, but there's a lot that we can do to reduce the risk of wildfire happening. And so again, we're going to talk about that situational awareness in meteorology and how it relates to how we're keeping you all safe and keeping our community safe. What's happening now, today, the current conditions, and the short-term wildfire risk based on forecasting techniques and computer modeling, advanced technology, and good old-fashioned weather forecasting techniques, like stuff that's been going on for decades and even hundreds of years. So let's start with that daily risk forecasting. What's going on with the weather right now, today, everywhere that we provide power across Pacific Power. So we're a team of 5, soon to be 6. We have 3 meteorologists who are based in Portland, and the other 2 are based in Salt Lake City. We cover 6 states because Pacific Power, Rocky Mountain Power, we're sister companies, so we work together. So even though we have meteorologists in Salt Lake City, they're actually watching the weather here. We're constantly discussing what is happening in both parts of the company. So there's always somebody keeping an eye on things. There's a meteorologist on duty that covers weather forecasts for 3 states. Our 3 states here in Pacific Power, Washington, Oregon, and in California. We cover Northern California as well. I was on duty last week, so this week I get a little bit of a break. I'm still keeping an eye on the weather, of course, but we have another weather forecaster who takes over. And then the other weather forecasters, they switch off and they cover Rocky Mountain Power. But I've forecasted for them. They'll forecast for here. The team I work with, they're very smart, excellent forecasters. They have an excellent background in forecasting, and they all have their specialties. We make weather forecasts 5 days out. We're focused on the transmission and the distribution lines. Now, for some, as someone who just came from outside the utility world, I didn't really understand what that meant. So again, transmission line is the big old, what a transmission line looks like. It's huge, right? Or often they're huge. poles that have multiple lines, and they have a massive right-of-way, and maybe they go through some of our forests, they go across our freeways. We're forecasting for everywhere those lines go, thousands of miles of lines from the source of the power into our distribution systems. And then the distribution line is the power line that hooks up to your house, your home, your apartment, wherever you may live, right? That's the local stuff, right? The stuff that's here that comes out of the distribution systems locally in town. So we're weather forecasting for every single line in the entire territory. So thousands of miles of territory. So if we're a power company, we are watching the weather where you live, where everybody lives. Just the other day, I was knee deep into a map of this area, just like looking at all the different circuits and looking where certain kinds of risk exists. So we're all a bunch of weather nerds and geography nerds just staring at maps all day and looking at what's happening with the weather. In the winter, we focus on storms, freezing temperatures, ice storms, snowstorms. But this time of year, as we head into fire season, that's what it's all about. The conditions that lead to widespread ignition or fire days, high-risk fire days. Those hot, dry, windy days. In a place like Coos Bay, you don't get a lot of them, but they do exist. For example, a day like tomorrow, where temperatures are going to shoot up into the 70s, maybe approach 80 over the next couple of days. The wind comes a little bit more offshore, northeast or easterly. That would be the sort of day we would be concerned about right here at Coos Bay, North Bend area. Because you guys don't get that weather that often, right? You don't get the offshore breeze. Today, the wind, I was out with Nora earlier, the wind was ripping today, right? Nice and chilly. Reminder that winter was not that far away. We just came out of winter. Well, the opposite's coming down the road. Now, if this were June, July, August, yeah, you bet we'd be extra on watch on a weather pattern like that. Let's get to the bottom line here, right? We've got a bunch of ways to monitor the weather. We've got 450 weather stations that we're using to monitor the weather 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Essentially, there's always somebody available to answer questions for the utility about the weather. We have forecasting during the day, during the week, but we have an on-call meteorologist all the time, keeping an eye on things. For example, I was the on-call last weekend. We had a big storm in Wyoming and Utah. I was at my computer every couple of hours in between playing with the kids, and doing stuff with my family. So we're always watching. All our weather data from these weather stations, they're all these little dots here. We'll show you a close-up map shortly of this area. Those are all tied to our different circuits, the distribution I was telling you about. So everybody who has a circuit from Pacific Power going to your house, we have a weather station associated with your circuit. It may not be our weather station. We have a lot of weather stations, again, 450, but there are also hundreds of other weather stations that are maintained by ODOT, by various government agencies that we also tie into our computer modeling network. So we know what the temperature, the humidity is, et cetera, all that stuff. We have that all together. So let me show you that localized map, right? There's Coos Bay. You can see right here, North Bend, and then weather stations throughout the area. So we have all of our data is tied to all these different weather stations across the area. The network continues to grow. We're installing hundreds more over the next few years. Some of these weather stations, they feed us data every 10 minutes. So it's real time. It helps us understand how a weather situation is evolving. That's very important when we get into fire season and when we get into the potential for that, what we call the PSPS, Public Safety Power Shutoff. We'll talk more about that a little bit later with Nora and Megan. They'll kind of allude to how that's part of our wildfire mitigation strategy. So we'll talk more about that shortly. We also have weather stations that provide us with live and dead vegetation moisture. So the moisture of live and dead vegetation, you're thinking, what do you mean by like dead vegetation having moisture? That doesn't make sense. But I think a lot of folks, if you think about it, it'll make sense, right? Something on the forest floor, it may be dead, but that doesn't mean it's dried out, right? Things grow in that and contributes to the moisture of the other plants and in the soil. I mean, it's all interconnected, right? So it's super important for us to know if that stuff that stuff on the forest floor, the duff and all that other stuff, is that moist? Because if it's moist, fire, yeah, it could possibly start, but it's not likely to spread quickly. And that's what we want. We don't want these quick spreading fires. That's one of the biggest dangers in wildfire risk these days, is just a fast, quickly spreading fire. So we use that data in order to determine the risk for the entire system. This is all weather-related data. Again, it's available on that website right there. So jot it down. We'll talk more about it throughout the presentation, but pacificpowerweather.com. It's a free resource. It's got all of our weather stations up there. It also has a bunch of other weather stations that we don't own up there. And everybody that has Pacific Power as their utility, we have weather data that is, again, connected to your area. And it's free. It has all of our data, the computer model, the advanced modeling I told you about that we have in our house. Like I say, in our house, in-house at our in our office. It's all there, freely available. Okay, so it's not just the weather stations and our expertise in-house. We don't live in a vacuum. We do work with other agencies. National Weather Service, NOAA, the National Interagency Fire Center, we are on calls with them. We have meetings with them. We train with them. We go to conferences with them. We work with these partners, government, state, local, other utilities as well. We had other I had a meeting with Idaho Power a few weeks ago. I was in another meeting with Portland General Electric. We have a big California utility meeting coming up soon where a bunch of our meteorologists can go meet with all the California utilities, find out how they're preventing wildfires. We're trading ideas. We're working together. It's a collaborative effort because it is a problem that is a societal problem. It's not just a utility problem. It is a problem that all communities are being impacted by. So we have to work together. We all have to buy into this to reduce the risk. We're all trying to do our part, right? So let's talk real quick about that short-term modeling. Talking about how we put together everything for that 5-day forecast. And we'll transition into that talking about our short-term fire weather modeling and our fire modeling as well. We have a fire risk model that we actually have for that as well. So we have an in-house computer model that is called a WRF, Weather Research Forecast Model. And we run it forward 4 days, and that's how we come up with our forecast. We use a lot of other model data, but we have our own in-house computer model. We've also taken that computer model and we have run it backwards in time to get a good base understanding of what the weather has done in a past 30-year period. And then we can say, okay, based on the 30 years of that computer model data, right, for this location right here in North Bend, for example, a wind of, let's just say, I'm just pulling this out of the air, but a 50-mile-per-hour wind is a top 99% wind, meaning that only happens 3-4 days of the year. We use the data from that reanalysis, we call it, the running backwards of that computer model, to look forward. So we can say, according to this data, this has only happened a handful of times in the history of this location. So we know when we have the most extreme days of wind or temperature or other things like we use for forecasting the fire, fuel moisture. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. It's pretty cool stuff. So we use that historical data to look forward in order to see what kind of risk we are facing every single day of the year. Every single day we're using that data as well. We also use that to identify the days that we are most likely to see the wildfires ignite and potentially spread quickly. The more dangerous the fire days, the more we're concerned about the potential impact to the community. All right, so let's talk about the computer modeling. How does it work again? So again, just to reiterate, it compares a given forecast every single day to a 30-year history And looking forward, we can say this is the most extreme, or this is not that extreme, or this is not of concern type of weather that will impact the power lines, the risk of power outages, wildfire ignition, and how fast it'll spread. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Let me show you the modeling in action, okay? I don't know if you all are familiar. This was in the news last August, September. The Smith River Complex. There's a big fire just south of here. Probably saw some of the smoke occasionally here. This is during that time period. This is the WRF model, our in-house computer modeling, and this is the wind forecast. So this actually will tell you, this was telling us during that time period, there actually wasn't that much wind when that fire ignited, right? It wasn't a wind problem. It was a lightning problem. That complex, those series of fires were started by lightning. Our computer showed that. We knew there was going to be lightning potentially starting fires. In fact, there were over 200 lightning strikes in that time period that led to small fires that started. But only a couple of those fires became sustained enough in order to become a complex of fire. This is one of the biggest fires of the year last year. Very rural area, but it still had a significant impact on thousands of people. And this is why. This is that wildfire modeling. I didn't really get to talk about it, but so I'm going to quickly talk about it here. It's from TechnoSilva is the name of the company. It's called Wildfire Enterprise Analyst. And we'd actually simulate fires using that. It's pretty cool stuff. So we simulated the fire daily. We would do this daily because it was threatening our transmission lines. Those are our transmission lines right there. This was in Northern California. And that transmission line, Pacific Power transmission line, was threatened by the fire. So every day we would model the fire. Now this model, it's not perfect. It's a computer-driven forecast, but it basically shows you what would happen, the behavior of the fire if it had no fire suppression. Now, as we know, generally, especially with fires like this, there will be some sort of suppression work. There will be some kind of work. CAL FIRE especially, they do amazing work. Those firefighters, they literally are heroes, right? So they're out there working on this. So it's not going to follow that. I mean, the model can't model that. It can't model the behavior of humans and what we do, but it can model what fire would do if it was not suppressed or uncontained. And then this is what we call one of those fire indices. So there are dozens of them. What's important about this, I'm not going to break down the full detail of that. What's important about this, though, is the orange here represents an increased amount of energy that was available for fire. So during that time period, we had very light winds. We didn't have a lot of onshore flow, and we had available energy for potential fire. This particular indice is a good way to indicate whether there's potential fires that could start. What's cool about that Wildfire Enterprise Analyst, real quick, is it actually simulates fire every single day all over our network of distribution. So as if there were a fire, what would it do? And then it says, hey, these are the areas. We have indices that tell us these are the areas that have the most potential for wildfires. It's really amazing and cutting edge technology. I was floored when I learned about it. I'm still learning about the program, to be honest with you. And I have a lot to learn in a short time because fire season is right around the corner. Last thing I want to show you again, PacificPowerWeather.com. It has the in-house computer model data I was talking about. Our WRF model has wind, relative humidity. You can sort it by different parameters like strongest winds, temperature, humidity. What's really cool is that when the winds get to a certain threshold, remember I talked about that percentile, that 99 percentile, the extreme wind, it'll sort itself and show you those most extreme winds. So this is available to the public. Anybody can go to it. PacificPowerWeather.com. If it gets to a certain percentage, it'll light up yellow. I believe that percentage is 90th percentile. And then as it goes into the darker colors, into the 95th percentile, my apologies, 95th percentile, and then the red colors would be the 99th percentile. So this is just an example of what it looks like. This is a weather station, Rowena, I forget where this is. I think this is up by Hood River, so farther north. But the idea is that when the winds get to a certain percentile, it'll light up and show you those stronger winds. So again, it's freely available. You can check it out anytime. And it's just something, just data we want to provide to the public. In fact, some other utilities tell me they use it all the time. National Weather Service will sometimes check it out too. So it's pretty cool stuff. So with that said, I've kind of covered the short term, what we do. We're watching the weather all the time, the weather conditions that could lead to widespread fire or high-risk fire days. We're also looking ahead 5 days to give the utility a heads up. But there's a lot more that we do. So next I'm going to send it over to Megan. She's the head of our wildfire mitigation program. She's going to talk about those tangible things that they are doing to our infrastructure in order to keep you guys safe, keep the community safe, and keep the power on as long as we possibly can. Thanks.
Thanks, Chester. Appreciate the introduction there. So, yes, I'm the Director of Wildfire Mitigation Program Delivery. That's a really long name, right? But basically what it is I'll be talking to you today about some of the programs or some of the tools in the toolbox that Pacific Power has, right? And just kind of to talk a little bit about the scope that we'll be talking about today, I'm talking about utility-related programs. There's a lot more wildfire mitigation efforts that are occurring out in your communities. You know, Chester mentioned it's a societal problem, right? All these communities are trying to come together and solve this problem from different aspects, right? So I encourage you all to reach out to your public safety partners, to your emergency managers, and kind of learn more about what other organizations are doing. And also just kind of to get a feel for the room, is there anyone here who's not in the Coos County area? Is there anyone from, like, I don't know, anywhere else, like Douglas? Josephine? Okay, good to know. Okay, thanks. Okay, curious about that. Thank you. Okay, so talking a little bit about Coos and Josephine. Okay. So, you know, Chester talked a little bit through the situational awareness, right? He talked about how the utility is watching the weather or watching wildfires, right? And you're probably like, okay, well, what is the utility doing about it? You're watching it. What are you doing? And so I'll be speaking to some of the programs that Pacific Power has employed, or I would also call them like our tools in our toolbox, if you will. These are different types of programs that may be applied in different situations, right? So what the utility is doing depends on the kind of risk, right? So firefighters have many different kinds of tools to fight a fire. A utility has many different kinds of programs to mitigate wildfire as well. And so generally speaking, these programs are going to be broken up into two kind of groupings, if you will. The first set of grouping, I'll call something called system hardening, right? And there's this great little display with equipment, and I'll be talking more about it. It's what you think of when you think of let's make our system more hardy and less susceptible to things like tree limbs falling on it and things like that. The second grouping of activities or programs I'll be talking about is going to be more about operational practices. So how the utility can operate differently to mitigate wildfire, or even how the system itself can be operated differently. So those are the two general groupings that I'll be speaking to. And the first topic that I talked about a little bit was system hardening, right? Making the system hardier. Typically, these programs are selectively applied or prioritized, if you will. We're working first the areas of higher long-term risk. And so Pacific Power has developed the fire high consequence areas. This is fully described in our Oregon Wildfire Mitigation Plan that's available on our website. I think the link for the website's on the bottom of the panel over there. And you can also Google Wildfire Mitigation Plan Pacific Power and find it that way. The fire high consequence area, what it does is it identifies areas of risk by what you can think of as fuel. It evaluates fuel and also difficulty of terrain, right? So if you think about it, this is a scenario where if an ignition were to start in the woods, in the middle of the woods, it would be catastrophic or very bad, right? It would be difficult to get to, and it had the potential to spread rapidly. So this is the type of risk that is identified with our FHCA maps. These FHCA maps are used to prioritize work such as vegetation management, some asset inspection work, as well as the grid hardening program. So those are like the three catchphrases, if you will, that I'll be going into a little more details. starting off with talking a little more about system hardening. First, in general, one program is called our line rebuild program, right? So typical conductor can be bare, right? So it's just bare conductor, right? So a limb falls on it, poof, you know, it has a potential for ignition. And so we have some programs to mitigate that type of risk through rebuilding the line with covered conductor, or also through undergrounding. When rebuilding with covered conductor, there's an example over there. It's literally adding a cover on the outside of the conductor. As part of this process, it can be pretty heavy, right? So there's a new design process that happens and potentially new poles that need to be put in place, right, to handle the heavier load. And in scenarios like this, there's also the ability to upgrade the poles themselves to be more resilient material. So you'll see, you know, with line rebuild, you'll see things like covered conductor going in, and you'll see things like more resilient than wood materials. So fiberglass poles, steel poles, things like that. Additionally, you'll also see aerial spacers. If you can think about it, when bare wire, you know, wire-to-wire contact can also be a fault or an event that could occur. And spacers, aerial spacers, are also included as part of the line rebuild with covered conductor to prevent that sort of slapping of wires. Additionally, Pacific Power does do undergrounding on a project-by-project basis. So evaluating a line for line rebuild, okay, do we put in covered conductor, do we put in underground? Underground isn't always necessarily the answer. And so it does happen. It is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And so this is what I would say the line rebuild. This is some of the work that's prioritized in the FHCA areas. This is the heavy hitter, if you will. But there's also some other work that's occurring, such as upgrading the system reclosers and relays, and this is happening system-wide. So even outside the FHCA, we've identified that, you know, Chester's, you know, situational awareness maps and analysis is showing, you know, risk can happen anywhere. So let's be prepared anywhere, right? And so let's put these smart reclosers and relays, if you will, in different places. Chris Spencer, in the video at the beginning, he was talking about, and we're making the system smarter. I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but in my mind, that's what he said. And this is what he's talking about. Reclosers are the key to minimizing blackouts. They restart the system automatically, so they switch power off quickly. If you've had your lights flicker, so you're sitting down to dinner and you're like, man, your lights flicker, that's a recloser operating. It flickers twice, and then you're like, oh man, what's going on? And then it shuts off. That tells you, okay, a patrolman is probably patrolling a line to see if a fault has cleared, right? And so that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes of your power experience, if you will. And it's all possible through these reclosers and relays, the switching to prevent ignitions. So that's a little bit of the hardware upgrades, right? The physical stuff that's happening to the system. There's also operational practices that can be deployed. And generally speaking, there are a few categories of operational practice. There's vegetation management work, there's asset inspection work, and then there's alternative field operations work that can occur, and then operating the system itself a little bit differently. So starting off, talking through vegetation management. Vegetation management at Pacific Power can happen through aerial and ground surveillance. Generally speaking, in the FHCA, you know, where we have that greater risk identified, clearances are going to be wider. Additionally, there will be different clearances for your fast-growing trees, right? So there's different groupings of vegetation, and for things that we know grow faster, we're going to trim them back further to ensure that the clearance is maintained throughout the cycle or throughout the years that we're not inspecting as well. And then also there's tree removal, and not pictured here is there's pole clearing. So the pole clearing program is interesting. What happens is on poles, select poles that have, you know, equipment that has potential for spark or ignition, they clear the entire bottom of the pole from vegetation. So you can imagine those raspberry bushes, those blackberry bushes, cutting them out, right? So that way, in case some ignition were to fall down, there's not dry fuel for them to fall onto, right? So that's the pole clearing program. There's also tree removal. So Lorelei in the video at the beginning, she talked a little bit about how she was observing a tree that, this probably isn't going to come back. That's a risk, right? If it's a windy day, that's a risk to fall in the line. And so we want to clear that. And so that's another component of the program, is removing the dead, dying, disease, the trees with the potential to fall into a line, right? Next, talk a little bit about some asset management programs. You can think of this program as mitigating the risk associated with equipment, okay? So, fixing conditions quicker that have more ignition potential. So Pacific Power goes out and inspects more frequently in the fire high consequence area. There's also additional patrols that can happen as a result of information from situational awareness. So we can do additional patrols system-wide as well. And during the patrols, conditions are found, or, essentially things where equipment isn't quite meeting, spec, or it isn't quite looking quite right, and it's broken or something like that, right? It's identifying those types of risks, and then it categorizes them, into different priority levels, and it's worked by priority level, right? So you can think of this as, we're fixing the worst stuff first. That's what we're trying to do. Another thing that asset management program is doing is it's doing IR inspections. So there's helicopters that will fly with a heat camera, a thermographer, that is visualizing the lines for hot spots to try to identify equipment before it fails, right? We're trying to find the hot stuff, if you will. And those are the IR inspections that are flown on all transmission lines across the Oregon system. And then also in not quite asset management, but sort of asset management adjacent field operation practices, there are alternative field operation practices too. So, should Chester, I could say Chester's like meteorology report, but should the meteorology report from the team that Chester's on indicate, a certain level of risk, there are options for field operations to work differently. So, for example, not driving off the roads. Vehicles can be a source of ignition. We don't want that. Or even deferring non-essential work. So working at a different time. It's really dry, it's really windy. Let's try to work this at a different time, right? So there's some operational practices that occur as well. Field operational practices. Additionally, right, so these are all the tools, quite a broad range of tools to pick from depending on the risk. Another tool that is available system-wide is a sort of tiered approach to operating the system differently. And I generally describe it in sort of three groupings. They seem to like the number 3 today. One is the first level, right? You can think of this as like, okay, it's kind of running, my risk is there. We can do some enhanced safety settings, for which there's a cool video in a little bit. And then there's the next tier where it's like, okay, this is really bad. Let's do a public safety power shutoff. That's like the next tier. This is really a tool of last resort. And I really do want to emphasize PSPS is a tool of last resort. As a utility, we want to keep the power on. We want to provide power to our customers as much as we can. However, the risk of wildfire is just so great, we need to have this tool in our toolbox, and so it is there. Nora will be speaking to it in a lot more detail on notifications and preparedness and all the good things around it to be prepared. But I do want to emphasize once again, it's really a tool of last resort. Third, so I kind of stepped through the first 2 tiers, kind of windy, really windy, The third tier is, okay, there's a wildfire approaching our lines, right? So Chester described how, as a utility, we are watching the wildfire approaching our lines, right? One tool in the toolbox that Pacific Power has is the ability to shut off should a wildfire be encroaching on or approaching our assets. And this sort of tool allows us to shut off the power, as it's approaching the assets, so the assets do not contribute further to a wildfire, right? And so these are the general 3 tiers. Before I turn it over to Nora for a little bit more on the PSPS, I do want to think we want to watch this really cool video in enhanced safety settings to kind of kick it off.
With more extreme weather, we're seeing an increase in dangerous wildfire conditions. Pacific Power is taking additional safety precautions to protect our customers and the communities where they live. When wildfire risk is elevated, we may place some of our equipment on more sensitive settings to mitigate the risk of igniting a fire if a power line is contacted. When these settings are in place, our lines will de-energize within fractions of a second when there is interference detected. A power outage is more likely to occur when these more sensitive protective settings are in place. We understand that outages disrupt our customers' lives and that with these enhanced settings, they may experience longer than typical outages as our crews patrol to make sure it's safe to turn the power back on. If an outage occurs, we will notify you of the estimated restoration time via call, text, or email. Our crews in the field patrol and inspect power lines and equipment, then perform any necessary repairs to ensure the power can be safely turned back on as soon as possible. Safety is our #1 priority, and these sensitive settings ensure a lower risk of wildfire for our customers and communities. To learn more about these safety precautions and for resources to support you during wildfire season, visit pacificpower.net/ready.
And, you know, this video showed an excellent, like, light little twig falling on the line, right? But there is a potential that it could be a whole tree on a really windy day too, right? And that can take some time to clear. That can take patrolmen patrolling the line. Oh, I found something. I need to cut it up. It can take some time. And so it really just depends on the sort of risk they're seeing. If it's a twig and the recloser can turn back on, or if it's an actual whole tree. So I did want to just mention that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nora. Nora's got some excellent advice on preparedness and things that the community can be doing as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Megan. Can you hear me okay? I have a very quiet voice. Thanks. All right, so you heard from Chester about how we find out when the weather's going to be bad. You heard from Megan the work that we're doing long-term and strategically to harden our system. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the interim and what to expect from a public safety power shutoff, and then how you can prepare at home for yourself, your friends, your family, your loved ones. But I do want to just reiterate what Megan talked about with the PSPS. Those are temporary shutoffs. They're meant to be very short duration, only during the critical time period that we need to conduct them. So how do we find out what we need to do? Well, we look at 3 different criteria for PSPS events. There's 3 conditions that need to be met. So first, we need to have the right weather conditions. We're talking about very hot, very dry weather. All of the vegetation has dried up. And then extreme wind. So wind is really the key factor. If we don't have a lot of wind, it's not likely that we would ever consider a PSPS. The other condition is the condition of the terrain, right? So if you have a flat grassland area with a lot of dense grass and it's very windy, that fire could take off. If you have a forest and steep terrain, that fire can take off. So those are the kind of conditions that we consider. Additionally, if it's going to impact people or infrastructure. So some of you have heard about fires that are managed and they're allowed to burn because they're not impacting people or infrastructure. But those are the 3 considerations that we look at when considering doing a PSPS. And just for reference, we've only done 1 in Oregon. From the time that we've started this program, it's been 4 or 5 years now. That was in September of 2022. Some of you may have remembered that in the news and heard about it, but it was about 20, 21 hours average for the customers that were impacted. So I'll talk about what we go through, what you can expect, and our notification timeline. It may be hard to read in the back, but I'll just quickly walk through what to expect here. So during a PSPS, we'll contact you a total of 6 times. It's a lot of times, I know, but they're very dynamic events, so it's really important for us to communicate with you. We find out from Chester about 5 days out, like he talked about his forecast, that these conditions could potentially cause a PSPS. We start trying to figure out exactly where those locations are and then internally work to put that together. 3 days in advance or 72 hours in advance, we'll contact our local public safety partners who are here today front and center. Thank you. We appreciate you guys coming. We would contact them, and 2 key things that we work to determine are what are the critical facilities that need to stay operational? Do they need generation support? Are there any customers that need that are in hospice or in skilled nursing or other facilities that would need that support, and what kind of support do they need? And then we talk about, do we need to stand up a community resource center? So this is not a shelter where it's open overnight, but this is a location that people that are impacted can go and get power, charge your medical devices, charge your phones, get on the Wi-Fi, get information about the event, get medical, low-level medical care if they need it, get snacks and drinks and get out of the heat. These, we determine where to stand up before the event, what makes sense to the community that's impacted. Then we start the customer notification. So 24 to 48 hours out, we make the first notification, hey, potentially this could happen. We contact you directly by phone, text, and email, the information that we have on file for you. We do this again at 24 hours out to let you know it's still on track or the time has changed a little bit. And then again, 1 to 4 hours out. Ideally, if the weather doesn't materialize, then we let you know that we won't be doing a PSPS, but if it does, we give you that final notice at the time of de-energization. This gives you about 2 days to plan if you need to make accommodations or things that you need to do to prepare for it. Then during the de-energization, if for some reason the weather extends beyond 24 hours, we'll make notifications every 24 hours to keep you updated. Once the event has passed, we'll notify you again that it has passed and we're going to start restoring. This can take time because what our teams have to do is they have to patrol the lines, they have to fix any of the damages, they find trees, branches, they find broken poles, they have to fix all that before they can restore the power. And they can only do this during the daytime when they have full visibility. They can't do this at nighttime. Once the power is restored, we'll make the final notification, and we do this for two reasons. First, if you're left home and you went somewhere else, to let you know it's safe to come home. And then second, if for some reason your power is not restored, so that way you can call us and let us know, hey, I still have an outage, and then we'll troubleshoot and make sure we get your power restored. So a lot of notifications, but as you can hopefully understand, there's reasons for all of those. Now, I'd like to talk about why it's important we have your contact information. So because we contact you directly, we ask that you make sure that you update your contact information on a regular basis, and we ask that you do this either by calling customer service or by going online to your account. Otherwise, you will not receive these notifications. So for most customers, we'll make notifications via recorded phone call, it's a recorded message, an email, and a text message. But for our customers who have medical needs for power or electricity, we have a customer service agent call them personally, and they make sure they understand the situation, check to see if they need a generator or need other support. But the only way for us to know if our customers need this type of support is if they register with us. We don't have access to any public databases or any health records, and so we really don't know our customers that may need that kind of support unless they let us know. On the top, you'll see a link, a QR code to how to register as a medical baseline, and I encourage if you have anybody in your family, anybody in your friends, that you make that contact and you register so that way we're aware that you're out there and you may need some assistance. The other thing I'd like to share is that we have a rebate program as well. The rebate program allows up to $4,000 off of either a backup generator, a battery, or a permanent standby generator. They are for customers that have enrolled in the medical baseline program, and you can apply as a customer. You can also apply if you're a care facility and you care for individuals that are seniors or have disabilities. And so there's a variety of ways that we can help reimburse that cost because it's a significant cost sometimes. And just to share, we have the brochures over here on the side. So afterwards, I encourage you, if you know anybody that could benefit from this, to go ahead and register. I'm trying to go fast so you guys can get to the Q&A portion. All right, so moving on. this is Q&A time. How many of you have an emergency plan? Nice. Okay. It's not bad. Okay. Usually it's like less than 10% of people. Emergency plan, it's free. It doesn't take anything. It just takes some conversations and some planning. There's a lot of free templates online that you can download. It's basically knowing what to do when something bad happens. Where are you going to meet if you have to evacuate or if you can't get home? Do you know where you're going to meet? Do you know what the impacts would be if you had an earthquake versus a flood versus a winter storm versus a power outage? What are your emergency contacts? I can tell you, I don't remember any of the numbers on my phone anymore. We don't dial them anymore. We're just like click. So write them down, have them in a place available, have your medication, your insurance information. All of that is critical, and if you don't have access to it and you desperately need it, it's a great peace of mind. How many of you have an emergency kit? Okay. Well, it's a start. Hey, that's a start. I like that. I appreciate that. It's honest. An emergency kit can be really overwhelming to put together. Of course, it takes time, it takes effort. You have to go out and buy things, and you have to, store them. You can have a go kit that if you can't get home or if you need to leave for a couple of days, you have supplies to keep yourself and those that rely on you safe. And if you have to stay at home and you're stuck, then you have a home kit. There's considerations, and it really varies on your household. It varies on your needs. Making sure you have food that people will eat, dietary restrictions, right? Make sure you have water. A couple of weeks is worst case scenario for an earthquake, but that's what's always encouraged. Make sure that you have anybody that has specific requirements like pets, leash, information, a kennel, those that maybe have access needs, maybe they can't walk very far, or maybe they need assistance in other ways. Consider those in your emergency kit, and that's the most important part of making that kit, is making sure that everybody that you care for has the ability to make it through a potentially disastrous event. So with that, what about around your home? How many of you practice defensible space in your home? Okay. Even more people than have emergency kits. That's awesome. Thank you. All right. As you know, it's broken out into 3 zones. The zone closest, the mid-zone, and further out. And really how you manage the vegetation can be part of the solution to wildfire and can make your home more resilient. So we really encourage this practice. There's ready information available online. And, we welcome that everybody is doing this. It's fantastic to see so many hands here. Additionally, as we are here in beautiful green Oregon, there's a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation, and with severe weather, with more windy weather, potential for trees or other debris to get into lines is expanded. And so we encourage, if you see or question any vegetation during any part of the day, please report it so that way it can be mitigated and corrected in advance of an actual event. And with that, I'm going to close and hopefully get us to the Q&A, the fun part of the evening. So again, I ask that please verify your contact information is correct. If you know anybody that has medical needs that require electricity, please encourage them to register with us. We only use it to make sure that we make positive contact and offer resources. And then also, finally, if you know anybody or you yourself can benefit from a medical rebate for backup power generation, we encourage you to pursue that. It's a great peace of mind, and it's a great resource to have. So I'll end with that, and I'll bring it back to Simon for Q&A. Thank you.